My guest today is a specialist houseplant brand that was formed 4 years ago by the cast of Made in Chelsea, no less. They're coming on the pod because they have some marketing challenges, and I've got a feeling this one might be quite technical. It's going to be a lot of fun though. Let's get into it. Welcome to Grow With Evergreen, the podcast designed to help you grow your business by providing practical insights into all things paid media, creative, and digital strategy. Every episode, we help home, garden, and lifestyle brands with their growth challenges by delving into their business, dissecting what they're doing, and defining a digital growth strategy they can take and deploy into their business. Let's get into it. Right, welcome back, beautiful people. I hope you're all doing well. Today, our guest is Bellr. That's the brand, not my actual guest. My guest is Kate, who's the head of digital strategy and marketing at Bellr. Now, if you haven't heard of these guys, they are a specialist houseplant brand. And as I said at the outset, it's a brand that was launched 4 years ago. It's very much still a startup brand, but it was launched by the cast of Made in Chelsea. We'll get Kate to tell us a little bit more about the brand. They've come on the pod today because they've got some marketing challenges. Specifically, they are struggling with the real techie stuff. And I know a lot of brands are going to be able to relate to this. So when you think about how you map and track all of your data. So you're making sales online, but actually, what's the single source of truth? What's accurate? They've got questions around cookies and attribution. And then really, how do we scale this brand? So it's going to be really interesting, this. And I think a lot of what we're going to cover, it might get a little bit technical. So you're going to have to bear with us, and I'll do my best to sort of dumb down the tech, and we'll navigate our way through it together. But I think what we're going to see in this episode is it's going to be super relatable because I know from the prospects that I talk to and the clients that we're working with that accurate data and accurate attribution even is a very hot topic, and actually understandable. Okay, where are our sales coming from, and what platforms and what channels are actually working versus those that maybe, okay, this is telling me this and this is telling me this. So this is going to be a really interesting conversation. As I say, guest is Kate, and she's also got some other questions that she wants to ask, which I think are quite interesting. I'll give you a little preview now. So some of the questions she asked are around some of the most avoidable mistakes that I see e-commerce brands making. She only wanted 3. I could have given her a lot more, but she's asked for 3, so I'm going to share those with her later in the episode. And then she's also said she's got some questions around GA4 and UA, and then Performance Max and standard shopping. So, we've got a treasure trove on today's episode. It's going to be a lot of fun. So I think, Darren, if you're happy to do the honors, we'll bring Kate on and we'll get into it. Here we are. Kate, are you there?
Hello. Hi.
Welcome. How are you doing?
Hi. Yeah, very well. Thank you. How are you?
Very good. Thank you. Yes. Thank you so much for joining us on the Grow With Evergreen podcast. Delighted to have you. So in your own words, do you want to just give us a little synopsis of who you are, who Bellr is, what you do? Over to you.
Sure. Hi, I'm Kate Luke, and I'm head of digital strategy and marketing for Bellr. What does that mean? So what I look at is anything within the digital sphere, within commercial or selling, so within e-commerce. And I try to marry together really what the business strategy is trying to achieve and then what we're putting out there to the consumer, making sure that our representation is correct and that anything that we are getting in terms of sales aligns with what we need it to deliver in terms of that bottom line as well. And then I marry together all the data and, of course, report on that to make sure everybody's in the loop.
So you have the tough job, don't you? You've got to cross all the T's and dot all the I's and make sure everything makes sense.
I do, but I love it. It's so good.
Am I talking to a fellow geek then? We're going to be able to have a geek off in this episode, are we?
Yeah, we are. 100%.
Good. I love that. Good stuff. So, and you said, Bellr's been going, just give us a little bit of history on Bellr, how it was formed, what's the Made in Chelsea link, and just give us a little bit of background on that.
Yeah, amazing brand. So in lockdown, as many of us were, we were looking at, passion projects. We had Sam Prince, who is one of the Made in Chelsea boys. He and his school friend, who is Josh Novell. Josh Novell's part of the Novell family, who are really well known within the garden centre sphere. They own Pole Hill Garden Centre, which is one of the largest in the UK. And they just decided to put this brand together because they had all the resources to do so. Both of them are extremely passionate and very knowledgeable about plants. And so Bellr was born. And then a few years later, they brought on Tristan Phipps, who's another Made in Chelsea cast member. Tristan is really great in front of the camera. He's very passionate about the brand. And yeah, between the 3 of them and myself now, we sell houseplants.
I see. I love that. So just give us a little segue into the numbers then. What does the business look like today?
Absolutely. So we are very much still scaling. I think within the lockdown period, there was a lot of fast growth, and then that sort of petered off, I suppose, because people got busy and distracted. And then I was brought on just this year. So I've only been with them for about 5 months.
Okay.
And the projected sales for this year were around £200,000.
Okay.
But that's, set to be a lot larger if we
Yeah,
do
yeah,
what
of
I'm
course.
setting out to do.
Yeah.
And beyond. So we're
I love
excited.
that. So what is an average order value for you guys then? Because obviously you've got a range of products. I've had a good look at the website. What's the average order value?
So it ranges depending on what sales channel we're on. It's definitely lower on TikTok, but we sell primarily through social commerce. So it's around £20
Okay.
AOV on social commerce,
Yeah.
whereas on the website it can be anywhere between £25 £30.
Okay. And what's the sort of the LTV, the repeat rate? Do you know that? Are you tracking that?
Yeah, as in the amount of returning customers.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just curious what's the new versus returning?
Do you know, it's fairly high. It's around 30% of
Okay.
returners.
Yeah. Okay. Amazing. And is that a year-on-year statistic? Are you pulling there?
No, that's this is last month. So
Oh
it's
wow.
actually
Okay.
down from the previous month. We're trying to, not depend on those repeat purchases so much and really
Yep.
kind of
Yep.
push the reach of the brand. So that's kind of a tactical decision to go
Sure.
for more new acquisition.
Okay, no, that makes sense. So I've just got a few questions, just because what I want to do, I want to get into marketing challenges, but before I do that, I just want to get a sort of a sense of the business and kind of the DNA of it online. So, and we'll look specifically, obviously, at just the direct to consumer side of this. So, do you know the breakdown of how reliant is the brand on the different platforms, different channels, or what I would call them the different pillars of digital marketing? So how reliant is the brand on traffic that you're buying through Google Ads, Meta Ads, TikTok, all of that? And then how much are you earning through, say, organic? And then what's your direct? Just paint me a picture in terms of the sort of the channel reliance as best you
Yeah.
can see it.
So you'll see what I mean when I say we're set to scale quite considerably from where we
Yeah.
are when I tell you this. So we are about 85% organic.
Wow. Okay. Organic.
Yeah. So no, in terms of our paid strategy,
Yeah.
currently we have very small portion on Google. We have, which I would like to see a lot larger,
Yeah. Yeah.
and a small part on our social ads. But primarily up to this point, yeah, it's been all organic, which is so exciting because it means that demand
You've got
and
huge room for
buzz
growth
is
there then, if
yeah,
that's the case. And I guess, do you know the proportion of organic that is brand? Is it quite high?
it is
People,
quite high. Yeah.
yeah, it's going to be because it's that, and that's great. It's good because it's going to, you've got that brand awareness. There is that loyal following. I can imagine the chaps on that are from Made in Chelsea when they put posts out. So all of that stuff's going to make sense, and that's going to have lifted the brand and given it that initial sort of phase of growth, and that is going to be tapping into organic. Are you splitting off organic, so brand and non-brand?
No, not necessarily. I think it's very natural, even if you were kind of transactionally looking in the realm for houseplants. I think it's very natural to have recognized the name Bellr because it's in press and it's on the show. So we're not necessarily separating out the two at the moment. We're kind of just assuming that there's going to be a snowball effect from the brand growing,
Yeah.
as so often
There
there is.
will be, but I would challenge you on that. You should be splitting it. So and I'll tell you why. Because you should be thinking when you're thinking about the traffic that you own or the organic traffic that is brand. I would think of that as traffic that you own, and that is hugely important. And it's going to be very valuable because they're always going to be you're going to get great average order values, you're going to get good return rates. So that makes all the sense in the world to have those, to have that traffic and to really focus on it and to make sure you're building the brand and you're seeing an ever increasing number of people searching for the brand. You
Yeah.
definitely want that. But what you should be doing as part of your organic strategy, because I wouldn't really define that as an organic strategy, I would define that as a direct to consumer. That is the traffic that you are owning. So
Yeah.
organic, what you want to be doing is making sure from an organic perspective, and you could just use this, GSC is a great way of tracking this. So Google Search Console is what you want to be doing is looking at organically, when I exclude the brand, how visible are we for terms out with no brand mention? Because that will give you a true sense. And that right now is going to be minimal. But you
Absolutely.
can then look at that. And when you put brand to one side, you can say, okay, well, how visible are we, which are the key categories, key areas, and then you can build that up. And that will give you a truer sense, because if you are increasing your visibility for organic when you exclude brand, that just means when you put the brand on as well, you're off to the races. I would see the brand as the cherry on the cake, not the whole cake. Does that make
Yeah, and
sense?
I know, I definitely love that. I think that's so true. What's quite unique about this business is that, our USP, I mean, there are other brands out there that are like us, but what we're finding is those sales are coming through because they want that personal touch from Sam or Tristan. So there's
Sure.
this fan base there,
Yeah.
and it feels as if they're buying into being part of that family. So
Yeah, I get that.
it's very difficult to separate that out from within your sales strategy, I think, when that's
Yeah.
your unique selling point.
From no, I agree. I'm not from a sales strategy perspective. I think I think it makes all sense, because you've got, it's like having any connection to a celebrity or someone famous. Why wouldn't you tap into that? And I would be all over that and make sure. So keep doing all of that from a sales strategy, because that's kind of pivotal and central to it. But for the longevity of this brand, for establishing this brand, frankly, another way to put this is Google right now, right? From a increasing your visibility, Google doesn't really care about the connection to any of the guys from Made in Chelsea. Really, the users will, the customer will, but Google really won't. Therefore, what you've got to do is, by putting the brand to one side, this is purely from a digital marketing perspective, by putting that to one side, you want to make sure that, okay, outside of the brand, outside of the connection to Tristan and anyone else involved, are we increasing our visibility and being seen as an authority, a reliable, reputable website and brand for the product?
Yeah, no,
Do
I
you see
think
what I mean?
I do.
And I
I
think
do think that's really
I
relevant.
think that is it's I would bake it all in. It's, ultimately it's all part of one and the same thing. But to be tracking that, I would be thinking, right, 3-5
Exactly.
years ahead now. Bellr, you're always going to want to be a very visible brand, and you're going to always have a brand strategy, but your organic strategy needs to go, if we park the brand, how are we going to ensure that we are one of the go-to websites as far as a search engine is concerned, for when someone searches for this type of houseplant, that type of houseplant, and so on? Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't allow yourself to become so siloed and thinking just about the brand.
No, I do think that's really relevant. Ultimately, that's, what we're seeing within the social commerce sphere, because I think there's two sorts of people that are following us and buying on TikTok. We've got those that are following the brand and are very invested in the content that we put out, and therefore will buy.
Yeah,
And then you've
exactly.
got those that are, on TikTok Shop, they've decided they want to buy, they've just got paid for the week. And there's a transactional mindset there. They kind of don't mind who they buy from, but they're just going to buy a plant.
There you go.
And we definitely get a mixed bag. So I think siloing,
Yeah.
making sure you don't
I
silo.
think just making sure, and because as I'm thinking, this is growth, right? When you're 2, 3, 4, 5, 600,000, yeah, the brand is going to be absolutely pivotal to that. And all the things you're doing from a brand perspective, leveraging those names and those faces, makes all the sense in the world. But that is going to be a limiting factor from an online. Again, I'm looking at this purely from an online perspective and thinking, how do you scale this into 1, 2, 3 million and beyond?
Yeah.
You need to make sure that alongside doing that, you have another string to your bow organically, where you say, alongside all of the great stuff we've got with the brand, we've also got good visibility, that when you look up house plants for the bedroom, for the bathroom, for this, for that, for the other, we're coming up. We're on that first
Yeah.
page. And if you focus just on the brand, that you're not going to be doing that. So I think it's just a
Yeah.
separate strategy. And obviously that then leads into, right, well, how do we do that? We look at how people search. We look at the best on the web right now. We make sure we've got a clear content strategy that is aside from the brand. You tell the brand story, but we're also building authority and becoming a go-to reference website, being an information resource, as well as a shop window for the products, the categories, the questions that people ask around the product that you sell.
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Not disagreeing with you at all. I think we're at the beginning of that journey, as you say.
Yeah,
And I think
exactly.
when we get a little bit more into the Google ad side, it's playing into
Yeah,
how
yeah,
we've
because
got
that's the other thing as well. Yeah, and this is the thing. I mean, to be honest, I'm amazed that to be. I know you're obviously in startup, but that reliance on organic is somewhat unusual for what is a startup essentially. And it's obviously ties back to the brand, because so are you planning from an ads perspective? I guess part of the growth is you're thinking about ads and what role that can play.
Exactly. Yeah. So we've just started putting in some tests here, A/B
Okay.
tests, various bits and pieces within the Google Ad sphere, so that we can better understand what what that return looks like at the moment, and then we can bake in, as you said, what we
Yep.
want it to look like for the future. So massively brand reliant at the moment, no surprise, but definitely trying to better understand how the portfolio
Yeah.
performs on a kind of case by case basis within those ads.
So where are you in that? Is it fairly early in that process? Have you mapped out any kind of, forecasts and all of that good stuff when it comes to paid? Have you done any of that yet?
No, very
Okay.
early doors. We're our second month in the Google Ads
Okay,
space. Yeah.
fine. And what from what you've done so far, what have you seen? What sort of have you invested in? What sort of returns are you seeing? Like, you've just dipped your toe in the water, but what have you seen so far?
Yeah, it definitely dipping a toe in the water. We've definitely seen better return on brand ads. Surprise, surprise. Those search ads and bits and pieces. I think within the shopping feed, I'm used to working with a return on ad spend of like 300% more.
Sure.
So currently at the moment, we're operating around 220, which is a little bit low.
Is that including
So
brand or is that excluding brand?
excluding.
Excluding brand at 220. Okay, because that's the other thing. I mean, what are you seeing on an average CPC right now? What's your average cost per click at the moment?
It's 44p.
£44. Okay, excluding brand. This is to brand. You've got a separate brand campaign, yeah?
Yes, separate
And you're
brand.
excluding the brand from any other campaigns, whether it's performance max, shopping, whatever. You're excluding the brand actively.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. So, because that was my immediate thing when you said, why I asked about the average order value, because at that average order value, making Google Ads work is going to take some time, and it's going to take some experimentation, as you'll well know, because there's only so much margin you're going to have in a 20 to 25 pound average order value.
Yeah.
So I think, outside of brand all day long is print. You're going to be printing money if you run paid ads for brand. Yes, that's obvious. But outside of that, I think that's going to be tricky. So, and I know you've got some questions on performance max stuff, which we'll get into later. Okay, that's good to know. So I want to get into your challenges. So just explain to me, the first one you put was about cross-channel data mapping. What did you mean by that, and how can I help, essentially?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the I don't think this is like a personal challenge. I just think it's a general challenge for the industry. I see it time and time again. So what I see a lot, especially within Shopify and within Google Ads, which is the two platforms that we're working within for this brand, is that you get different data sets depending on what they're measuring. So it's trying to reconcile that together, which is fine if you can afford to have like a data lake, or if you have something that literally is built. I've worked on things like Conjura and Tableau in the past where they are literally built to bring all of that in. But what if you're a startup and you don't have that within your sort of, tech stack budget? And therefore it can be quite resource heavy and costly to map these two things together. So I think just generally making sure that your cross network data reconciliation is really clean, so that by the time you're going to board or you're reporting on how that performance metric, how it's all looking, you've got it kind of perfectly.
So, and just remind me, so you're using GA4, and obviously Google Ads. Anything else in the mix at the moment?
We use a tool which integrates directly into Shopify. It's called Lifetimely.
Okay.
Which we find very good, but again, not necessarily accurate on all of the data points. So we just kind of pick and choose.
And what level of discrepancy then are you seeing for, say, if we just use those two? So you look at Google Analytics and it's telling you one thing. You look at Google Ads and it's telling you something else, but obviously specifically for the paid side. And then you look at your Shopify. What level of discrepancy are we seeing across those platforms?
It's not necessarily like we have a prolific discrepancy level. It's more the fact that I think all of us are slightly at the mercy of the platforms to keep the calculations the same. So a few years ago, I think it was about a year ago, we had Shopify change the calculation on an AOV, meaning that, I think it's stripped out shipping. Yeah, it's stripped out shipping. So we saw a drop in the reporting on AOV, which actually wasn't there. So I think this is just generally something that all data experts or anyone within this realm struggles with. And it's just a constant piece of work, isn't it? You have to really stay on top of it.
You do, and you're absolutely right. We've had so many conversations, and I'm actively working with all of our clients on this. And it's one of, I have to say, when I talk to prospective clients, it's one of the primary talking points is, I just don't know what's working. I don't know what to believe. If I look at Meta, if I look at Google, if I look at my own Shopify or my Magento reported, I'm seeing different numbers every which way, every which way I look. And so you're absolutely right. It is a talking point, and it is a thing. And I think for those that maybe listen or watch along that aren't sure, sort of like, well, maybe that's relevant for me. I think where this stems from, so just got to give a little, I'm just going to segue and give a little bit of history, but where this comes from is Google have changed. Google and just all the other platforms. Basically now, the average user, as we all know, has multiple interactions, different devices. With all of the changes over the last few years with GDPR and the iOS updates and all of the privacy stuff, essentially the internet is trying to become a more privacy-first way of working. And in that, it's meant that the good old days of being able to track a user and stalk a user and track every which way they move is becoming more difficult unless the user opts in, unless they say, hey, I'm happy to accept you track me. And then even then it needs to be first party and so on. So it is becoming more tricky. And what the way Google Analytics, the way all these platforms are adjusting to that is to actually go, well, okay, we're going to have to use AI. We're going to move to a data-driven attribution model, which essentially in layman's terms just means that, hey, I can't give you that single source of truth and say this is exactly how many sales were attributed to this channel, because frankly, that doesn't no longer reflect how users are using their devices, how they're interacting with the brand, and how ultimately they're going to go on to buy a product. So we've had to accept, as many marketers have, that you can't get a single source of truth now that is going to be exactly accurate. There are obviously lots of things you can do to make sure that across the different platforms, things are tracking in as coherent and as a consistent way as possible. And that's just, that's all in the settings. So there's lots of things from just making sure your attribution windows are set to the same defaults, making sure that you are tracking what is actually commercially valuable to the brand. The amount of brands we see where they're not, and they're tracking all sorts. And you'll have GA on a 30-day, but you'll have Google Ads on a 90-day, or vice versa. So it's actually, it is a piece of work. It does require specialist expertise. But it needs to just sit down and go, right, okay, if we think about the average time it takes us to acquire a customer, if we think about our primary marketing channels, and then we look at each one of them in isolation, and we go, are we being as consistent as we can? Because you've got different platforms. Some track and report on impressions. Others will only report on clicks. Some will default to 30 days. Some platforms will default to 90 days. Some will default to 7 days if you let it. So what we're doing is we've created, the way we've got around this is a couple of things. We've created essentially a checklist where we say, look, depending on the platforms you're on, go through all of the settings, all of the options you're given, and make sure as much as we can, we're getting we're being consistent across those platforms. That's what we're doing.
That's it. I think it's about actually setting aside the time to do the work.
Yeah.
I think many people skip over that when they introduce a new sales channel, and actually
Absolutely
deciding every single channel I set up, I'm going to go in and I'm going
because
to
you just leave it as the default. Everyone's busy. It's almost like, right, we create the ads, or we set this thing up, and it's on, it's tracking, it looks like it's accurate. Right, I'm on to the next thing. That is exactly that, and it is taking the time. But also, it's where a great sort of way I think about it is, if you think about Google Analytics of old, so UA tracking, so Universal Analytics, so GA3. That was really a tool that we all got to know and love for more than a decade. It didn't change for a decade, and we all got very used to using that. And it was nice and simple, and it really felt like a tool made for the marketer. You could go in, you could look at your bounce rates, you could look at your sales. It was very easy. It wasn't necessarily always accurate because it didn't reflect how people were using, but it gave you a single source of truth. Then when privacy became a hot topic, and that over the last 5, 6, 7 years, that has increasingly become more apparent, GA3 became obsolete. GA4 was a tool that was built to future-proof how tracking needs to have, and it leverages AI and machine learning to algorithmically say, this is what we're predicting or we suspect is going to happen. But in doing that, what they've actually done, what Google and these other platforms have done, is they've turned what was a tool for marketers. GA4 is now a tool for analysts. And I think the problem with that is the way an analyst approaches and looks at the data versus a marketer is very different. I'm a marketer. I'm not an analyst. So, even some of the GA I struggle with, and the team here struggle with, and we've had to at times bring in very specialist expertise because we need an analyst. We need a very different type of mindset and approach to really being able to understand and dissect and unpick this. So I think you're right. You do need to take the time to set it up, but you also need to get specialist skills and an analyst mindset to really look at it.
Yeah, I love that. It's funny because you've jumped. I mean, it's great, but you've jumped over the other two bits that I kind of submitted because I think they're all connected. We talked about, privacy and therefore the sort of black spots that we have in the data sets that we've got coming in from these platforms. That's only going to get worse the more that we have.
It is. It's about to get worse. Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. Exactly.
So we're at the beginning of that journey.
And that's it. Because all of your challenges that you submit, you're absolutely right. They're all very linked. They're all entwined into one another. And with cookies and attribution. And on the cookies thing, just to move us on, I had a look at the website. So do you know, and again, this is where it gets a little bit more technical. So your cookie banner at the minute, it pops up on the website and you've got the accept and then you've got the little X. Do you know, if that is set up correctly, your cookie banner? Because a lot of them aren't. A lot of them are.
Yeah. So funnily enough, I know many marketers that, especially with the recent consent, the V3 consent that Google required, they kind of had to go back and do that due diligence again. And it forced a lot of people to kind of really get into the detail of it. So we use a tool called Pandacies. And the technical support is absolutely fantastic. But two, I've seen it end to end and I know it's very clean in terms of what it tracks, what it doesn't. It's not going to leave us again with these black spots in terms of reporting, which I've seen with other providers. So I think that the tool is very great. It's very good at what it does.
Yeah. So something to check, because you might have it set up fine and that's great. But something I've seen, and I was literally talking to a client yesterday, or a prospective client about this yesterday, is that they had a cookie banner. They thought it was correct, but actually it was incorrectly set up. So it was tracking people before they accepted, and then it kind of didn't matter whether they accepted or didn't. They weren't going to track it. But you're absolutely right. With the premise of a cookie banner is you've got to basically give the user the option, say, look, are you happy to be tracked? Yes or no? And so what you want to make sure is if they accept, does that then activate everything? And is anything activated pre them accepting? Equally, if they don't, if they click X and they click out of it, what happens then?
Well, with Google, I mean, if anyone is struggling with this, Google do offer, an ability to go in and check your setup.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
then literally they'll go through all of the source code and check that it's doing what it should do by their standards. Whether or not you follow that is totally up to you.
Yeah, exactly.
But I would take that as gospel because I think if you don't, if you're not going to take that on now, you'll be forced to later down the line probably. So we need to kind of get our houses in order. And I think one of the things with the cookie banners is for a long time, people were looking at them as I'll stick it on the site, but I'll make it as low.
Exactly. Easily missed. Yeah, exactly that.
Easily missed so that nobody's upset about it.
Yeah.
And then of course, now we're in a place where we actually kind of need to force the user
absolutely
to, decide, do they want it, do they not? Because if it's a no, then we don't actually want that data. If it's a yes, then we absolutely need to capture it. So it's about, I think, being decisive.
Yeah. I agree. And what exactly, we've done a big piece of work on exactly this in recent months. And what I'm saying to brands now is, look, what you need to do is exactly to your point. You need to make the cookie banner front and center, pop up on the website, effectively make the website unusable until they accept. Make it annoying. Make it unusable. Make it unusable. I had someone that I was talking to very recently where it was the old school, I'm going to call it the old school cookie banner. So it was a tiny little thing at the bottom of the page, extremely, very easily missed. And it was just a little accept thing. And I'd missed it. I hadn't even seen it. You're on the website and you would never know it's there. The problem with that is the vast majority of people wouldn't see it. It was so minimal, you wouldn't see it. Therefore, she had so little data coming through and was like, I can't see the data. I don't know what's going on. And it was because you've put the banner so tiny, everyone's missing it. No one's therefore opting in. Therefore, you're collecting no data. So you do need to now with it, that consent, you need to say, look, it needs to come up and be like, look, really, you're not going to be able to use this website until you consent.
That's
or
it.
you've got to
Pop-up,
choose. You've got
front
to
and
choose.
center. Yeah, if I think the more annoying it can be, the better in some ways, because it's
Yeah.
going to force that data
I
point.
mean, being a cynic, the problem with that, of course, though I just think if I think ahead, the problem with that is the more that every website starts to do that, the more that the Joe Public is just going to become increasingly oblivious to it. We're all going to sort of glaze over and just kind of consent to everything, which great for the marketer, for the retailer, but from a customer, from a what the cookie banner is meant to do is actually just going to become increasingly, like when you sort of zone out when you see the same ad time and time again, it's going to almost do the same thing, I think. And just not, and that's, good for the marketer, but from the intention of
Yeah.
why the cookie banner was brought in the first place, I
I
think it's going to,
personally feel like that. I mean, I feel like that's okay from my consumer journey point of view,
yeah,
mainly because I don't really want to have to positively opt in. If I had my own way, I would just negatively opt out. So there are some sites that
yeah,
I might be
yeah,
like, I don't want this site.
yeah,
But
yeah.
unfortunately, that's not where we are, and I think
It's
that's
the world
fine.
we're living in, right? It's not going
Yeah.
to change anytime soon. So no, I'm completely with you. But I think that's, and the other thing, just to sort of go back onto the kind of because it's all, as I say, all of this, what we're talking about it's quite technical. So I hope you're with us, but it's all very, it's all very interlinked. So I think, because I think the attribution thing, just to go back to that very quickly, one thing that we also do, and it's really simple, it's really basic, but I don't think now brands can get away from it, is you've got to, as well as looking at your so we have like spreadsheets and dashboards and so on, as you'd expect, and as well as tracking, we're pulling GA4 or Triple Whale or all of these different tools and the platform specific data, and we'll cross reference them and we'll show them as trend lines and so on. What we'll also always make a point of doing is showing the own reported, so it's the Shopify
Mhm.
data as well directly. So when you're looking at your reports, are you bringing that in and overlaying that onto what the because that's going to
Yeah.
be the closest to the single source of truth that you're going to get, is
Mhm.
money that's in the till.
Yeah, exactly that. We have the e-commerce data layers brought in separately.
There you go. Perfect. Yeah, exactly. And I don't think there's going to be a way around that. Not until, I mean, Google are actively taking feedback on GA4, and they're trying to, there was a statement that came out recently where things hopefully might, and I think it's really where they're going to hope, I'm predicting, I don't know, but I'm predicting that GA4 will increasingly get simplified and become more and more marketer friendly, rather than it's been. So, and it's been much very for the analysts. The Google geeks, they love GA4 because of how technical it is. But the marketer, the mere mortal marketer, I think has struggled with it and gone, this is
Yeah,
very
I
confusing.
agree. Most of the feedback I had from, colleagues around that time was, I don't know how to do it. And I
Yeah,
would always say the same thing. Google have a skills shop. It's free of charge. Go and educate yourself and become a master at it, because I don't think it takes that much time to, put it aside in your evening or a lunch
yeah,
break.
yeah,
And even things like understanding better how their data models are split out, so you
sure.
can choose the right one for your business. Or, it might be that you guys absolutely can help them with that journey, because if you don't get that bit right,
Yeah.
none of the bits that you're then passing up the chain to
Exactly.
your manufacturer.
If you're feeding bad stuff in, you're going to get, less than ideal stuff out the other side. So yeah, I'm completely with you on that. But again, I say it comes back to carving out the time to do it, and also just having the headspace, I guess, to learn. And because it's relearning. It's like learning. I think I've likened it, because I've shown a few of the team here over the years. It's like GA3 to GA4 is a completely different animal. It works in a different way. It kind of just computes in a completely different sort of model and way of working. And once you get your head around it, it's actually pretty straightforward. And in a lot of ways, I actually think
It's
GA4 is better
better.
than
It is,
GA4.
'cause, if we think about the way in which it's changed, it's an event-based model now.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
it means that it's literally there to find the thing, the conversion that you will want to prove. So it's absolutely more accurate, and it's better built from the ground up. I just
Yeah.
think the UI and the user journey around the interface isn't as seamless as what we're used to.
Agreed. It
Maybe.
looks it's more intimidating, isn't it? It's more
Yeah.
intimidating when you go in. We have some clients that we sort of have to say to them, and we're showing them stuff, and you just sort of see them. They're completely intimidated, because it is a little bit more scary. But actually, you get over that, and then it does work. And if you get, like everything, if you take the time to set it up well, and you have an understanding of what it's trying to do and how it's trying to report and what it's trying to tell you, and what it's also indicating is that this is how things are evolving. It's not going to work like it used to. Then actually, I think it's hugely powerful. So yeah, I think the challenges you're facing, very similar. They're not isolated to you, as you said. very similar. It's kind of, I think it's just an industry change there. And I think the brands like you guys that are taking the time to actually think, okay, how do we make the most of this? I think you're going to be, you're going to be in a good place. But I think it's accepting the new normal with this.
Exactly, the new normal. And
Yeah.
I have a massive amount of trust in Google. I really, I've worked very closely with them in the past. I had great account managers that have walked us through things, and I just personally believe in them to see us through this
Absolutely.
next
Yeah.
phase.
It's already, the writing's on the wall. It's already improved. There's been wholesale gains in various things in the way things have improved already that weren't there because they're basing it on feedback and so on. It gets a hard rap, and there's definitely a lot of skepticism still, but I'm
Yeah.
with you. I think it has improved for sure.
It's
Right.
like PMax. PMax was a product that Google brought out. We all went, no, we want the control back.
Yeah.
And
We
then
did that for about 2 years.
yeah. Then we saw the return and went, okay, no, you knew what you were doing. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we didn't initially. It did take a minute, but yeah,
It
no,
was-
exactly that. Exactly that. I want. Speaking of performance max, I want to get into your questions. So, the first one you asked, which was, what are the three of the most avoidable mistakes you see e-com brands making? I've got a few ideas. I mean, some of them are fairly basic. I'll be honest. The first one I say, which we sort of touched on, is telling the machines the wrong thing, and whether that's wrong conversion data, whether it's getting your settings right, but just actually the amount of accounts we go and look at, and we say, okay, well, you've almost set everything up but left everything on default. Right, you've left everything there, and you'll have all of your conversions goal being pulled in, or you'll have, duplicate tracking, heaven forbid, or the way a conversion goal will be set up, or the conversion window will be set up. So one of the biggest mistakes I see brands making is just, and some of these are really established. We've got brands, doing hundreds of thousands online every month, and they'll have a huge discrepancy, a 6-figure discrepancy in their data tracking, and we'll look at it, but it's because of the way you've got this thing set up, because the attribution window, or the settings, or whatever it might be. So I would say probably the single biggest mistake I perceive as brain is just get in their haste to get everything set up and running. They don't take the time to get the basics in place and particularly when it comes to e-com sales, the conversion side of things accurate.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And unfortunately, I think that a lot of that housekeeping, especially, if we look at feed health as an
Yeah. Oh
example,
yeah.
of Google Ads, like people overlook that because it's not necessarily a glamorous task. You
Yeah.
don't get
No, it's really not. It's not one of the sexy tasks, is it? Absolutely.
No, you don't get, a pat on the head to say, wow, that's really moved the needle. But it's the quiet jobs in the background that make the
Yeah,
difference.
it really is. It's sweating the small stuff, isn't it? Exactly that. So I think that's the big one. That's the first one. The second one is, again, and I would class this as another real basic, but all too often it's a problem, and that is that a lot of e-com brands don't leverage and again take the time to get the audiences right. So they'll have great campaigns, really solid keyword research, great creative sometimes, good shopper feeds, etc. But then when it comes to the audience, they've done sort of minimal. They've put minimal effort into it. So we'll look and we'll see some of the geo-targetings off, or the some of the real base age ranges. I speak to clients and I go, how many 18 to 24-year-olds buy your product? Well, not very, neither. I'm like, well, you're targeting them. Turn that off. And then when it comes to the demographics and just the way you can overlay and build in your customer lists and build in all of your, you can basically segment all, there's a plethora of options there. It depends on brand to brand, but actually taking the time to really build out those audience signals if you're running Performance Max, or just the audiences themselves, those segments if you're running search campaigns, that is almost always quick wins. So when we take over an account, that one of the first places we'll go is, right, how well optimized and well built are the audiences?
Yeah.
So do you guys do you, I mean, that's something for you as you start to think about it, is yes, take the time to make sure your feeds and your campaigns and your keywords and your ads and your landing pages are spot on, but do not overlook the audiences.
I'm very passionate about audiences because I think that it comes from being techie, I think, and wanting to build your own first party data in the death of the third party cookie world.
Yep.
So, if you're somebody that has built, you've baked that into your sales strategy and therefore you're collecting that data, you want to use it, right? So we have the customer match lists built in. What I'm interested to know is how much of an uplift do you see once you put that data in?
It really depends. I mean, we've had a couple where it's had a really, really noticeable uplift because it was just it was madness that they weren't doing it. So we've seen it somewhere, we've had, I'm trying to think, we've seen somewhere Certainly in the first maybe 3 to 6 months, we might see a 15-20% uplift in performance. It's that
Wow.
significant.
Yeah.
It tends to then die down a little bit as it sort of levels out, but I think if you're not leveraging audience, and some of the accounts they just haven't got audiences set up, or they've got the bare minimum, and we then go to town, it also takes the time. So there's kind of two ways. There's sort of two sides to the coin that we see on this. One is there's so many quick wins, we apply them, we see a really noticeable uplift, and then it sort of dies down a little bit, but you end up with a consistent 10% up year on year or whatever. The other way is if they're doing a little bit, but then there are other things that we've got to bake in and we've got to build them up slowly. Then you see a little nudge initially, but it has that compounding effect that then it just improves and builds a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. So we see that as well. So it kind of depends on, again, it depends on the maturity of the account, how, the volume of spend and so on.
Yeah, okay. I think there's also, unfortunately, I think a lot of people are quite fearful of bringing in customer match as well because of the GDPR and
GDPR,
worrying
yeah,
who
exactly.
can
Yeah,
collect. And
yeah.
I think, again, there's loads of help documents on it. So for us, we knew where we stood because we'd done our research. And
Yeah.
then once you're not fearful of that anymore and you can bring in that first party data.
Yeah. I mean, it's really simple for anyone watching that's going, oh, well, I've got a list, but I don't know. Did they opt in? If they opted in on your website, or if they opted in via social, if they've opted in and actively raised their hand and said, yep, do you know what? I'm happy to hear from you. You're fine to use it. If they didn't, if you bought the data, then, there are ways around it and there are exceptions to the rule. It's not black and white, but as a general rule of thumb, if they haven't opted in, then maybe shy away from using it, particularly if you're going to take it from one platform and plug it into another. Maybe shy away from that or take some advice. But if they've opted in, you're absolutely fine to use it.
And if there's somebody that's bought from your brand before, they've also shown intent.
Absolutely. If they bought for you, 100%, they've raised a hand. They've gone, I'll buy that product. So they're in. Absolutely.
It can just be as simple as exporting your customer list and then importing it into Google with all the right,
And not just doing exactly that, and not just doing it once. Don't just do it. It's not a one and done. Either automate the feed so it uploads every week or every month, depending on the volumes you're doing, or if you need to, worst case, do it manually. But keep that feed coming in because it feeds into your retargeting. It feeds into your ability to keep your brand top of mind. Why wouldn't you do that? Why wouldn't you leverage the people that have expressed an interest, whether they've bought a product, whether they have downloaded a guide or been on your, if they've engaged with you and they've raised their hand and said, I am interested in this, I want to hear from you, I like this. Why wouldn't you say, well, great, I'll take you and I'll make sure I can keep my brand top of mind across this platform, this channel, and so on.
Yeah, totally agree. And how about with the NCA tool that we now have built into Google where we can, choose to feed that in and then either target them or exclude them?
What do you mean by that? The
new customer acquisition tool.
Right, sorry. I think much the same. Sort of thing. Again, I think as long get it set up right. I don't have an issue with using it. Absolutely.
And you've seen some good results from that.
I think it's fairly early. I think, again, for me, that would sit more in the camp of that compounding effect. If you do it, I don't think you're going to see a night and day uplift. But I think, again, if with momentum, with decent numbers coming in, I think it can add value. Absolutely. It's just another string to the bow.
Yeah, but then you've got this, sometimes Google will release things and you've got this sort of shiny new object syndrome.
A little bit. Well, that's kind of one. That's why when you said the acronym, I was a bit like, what? Because exactly that. There is always something new. And it's for me, I'm not, as a general rule of thumb, I'm not one of the earliest of the early adopters when it comes to new things. Like with Performance Max, I was a little bit standoff. I was like, okay, I'm just going to see what happens. So I'm generally, I am absolutely guilty of the shiny object syndrome. And so I'll experiment with some experiment sites we work on or our own. But when it comes to clients, I'm a little bit more cautious with the new latest shiny thing. So I sort of like to let a few others go and run with it. And then I sit back and go, okay.
Yeah.
And then I sort of have a look at it.
Exactly the same. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then the third one is the third mistake that I see ecom brands not making, which we touched on earlier, is shopping feeds. It blows my mind, Kate, that brands just use the default type. They don't think about how that shopping feed is coming across in the search results, whether it's shopping, Performance Max, whatever. And a simple way to think about this is by default, you upload your shopping feed into Google. Your products, you're only going to get a certain number of characters to show in that feed. So what you want to do is be reviewing that, be looking in the search results. How are your products coming across? What is the user seeing? Because the beautiful thing about Performance Max and shopping, when you've got those shopping ads, is you get three wonderful things. You get to show the product, you get to show the title, the image of the product. So what the product is, you get to say what the product is, you get to show what the product is, and you get to show highlight the price of the product. So you get 3 incredible attributes that you're not, for the most part, going to get with a search ad. What you need to make sure that you do, and again, we work with our clients to make sure that they do this, because all too often it's like you're just not leveraging this, is look at how that product is coming across in terms of the limited character count that you have and the limited space you have. Make sure that it really showcases the best of the product and reflects how people search. And so we've got clients where, because we do a lot of home and garden, so we've got clients where the summer period, absolutely key. And so what we'll make sure that we're doing is not only are we showcasing the product, but we might be insinuating by a text or the image the use case of the product. So here is the product, and it's for this occasion. It's for this type of use. It's for this purpose. It's for this type. It's for this scenario. Yeah. And you can do that. And by using custom labels, by applying additional attributes into the shopping feed, you can, one, get more search volume because the product is seemingly more descriptive and relevant to the how someone's searching, but it also stands out in the feed, stands out in the search results.
Yeah, I think having a point of difference is so important, because consumers also, we're busy, we don't have a lot of time,
Exactly
and actually make that decision easy for them. Just give them the data to say, you want this one, and they'll click it. And I think it can be that simple. As reviews is another one that gets overlooked all the time, that I think, what's the point of difference about why I'll click your product over this other one?
Exactly that. Yeah, no, I'm with you. So I think they're the 3. So it'd be the wrong conversion data. It's not getting your audience, just really taking time to nail your audiences, and then it'd be the shopper feed. They'd probably be the 3 of some of the biggest ones that I would say mistakes they make. Conscious of time, I want to just move on to one of the other questions, which was, how are we finding clients are getting on with GA? Well, there's two. Well, the GA for the UA, we've kind of covered that, so I think we can skip that one. But the other question you asked was for how are we finding clients getting on with Performance Max versus shopping? Before I answer that, what's your take? What's your experience on Performance Max versus shopping? I'm curious.
So I was really similar to you, quite a late adopter with the brand that I was at the time. We stayed on standard shopping for probably far too long. But there was a fear of losing that control of being able to decide where, on a like very itemized level, on a granular level. So I think there, again, it comes with, trusting Google. There's a little bit of trust when they bring out a new product like this, but absolutely, do your due diligence and make your own decisions. I personally feel like it's a great, fantastic tool, and it does so much more for your business, because it's able to really diversify the kind of adverts that you've got going out there, and it will make that decision without having to slow down the process and ask you, or for you to manually get involved. So yeah, I'm a big fan.
Good. I'll give you my 10 cents worth. So as we said, I was a fairly late adopter. And then actually, I would say for the good 18 months, 2 years, very skeptical, very, very skeptical of Performance Max, because I don't think the performance was there. For me, Performance Max or standard shopping comes down to one question. What's the business objective? What are we trying to achieve here? And I think it's, there is a place for Performance Max, but Google themselves has said, don't solely rely on Performance Max, and we don't. There's not a single client we work with right now that has a sole or a primary reliance on Performance Max. We still do a lot of standard shopping. I've got accounts spending 30, 40, 50 grand a month on standard shopping campaigns.
So you'll run standard shopping alongside the PMax?
Yeah, for different product categories, yes.
Okay, so you don't have the same product across the both of them?
No, so it wouldn't no, because then you would be competing, you'd be driving the price up yourself. But for different product categories, different, depends on different services, depends on what we're marketing. I absolutely think standard shopping still has a role to play. And we're seeing some incredible results. Now, there was a time, if I give you a bit of a checkered past, there was a time where I think Google were they would never say it, but I think they were proactively almost diminishing the results and the reach for standard shopping, because they were pushing so heavily to get everyone to move to Performance Max. That's going back a couple of years. And we saw that and we felt that. We were like, suddenly our reach has dropped off a cliff when it comes to standard shopping, even though we've opened the taps. There's nothing restricting it. We're just not getting the reach. And I just think that was because at the time, Google was so, Google's a commercial company. They were pushing so hard to get people to adopt Performance Max. I think the playing field has been leveled now, and Google have kind of gone, okay, Performance Max is a key driver. Standard shopping also has a role to play. So many marketers were like, I want standard shopping to remain. And I think now they've almost stopped the huge push to Performance Max, that I think they've almost learned to play together. And
Yeah,
I
I
think
would
that can
agree. I
so
think
that's what our approach is play together.
yeah, they were much more segregated before.
Yeah.
We saw the same thing because we were running Standard and PMAX at the same time.
Yep.
I think
Yep.
it was Christmas 22, and we went to a summit at Google, myself and my team, and I just remember saying, what is happening? We just cannot. We
Yeah.
can't even
Yeah.
spend. We want to spend more
Yeah.
money on PMAX. It won't
Exactly
spend
that.
any money. It was really strange, and I think there was a lot of development that went in over that period. We came back in 2023, and it had vastly improved.
Yep.
I also think with PMAX, it's only as good as your account health and the data
Oh,
health.
yes. And the assets you're feeding and the audience signals you're setting up.
So
Yeah.
people will blame the tool, but often there
Yeah.
is actually quite a lot of like work in the
Yeah.
background that
There
needs to
is.
go in.
I think the perception is performance max. Oh, it's easy. You can just chuck a few assets in and it will do all hard work, and it will. But it will give you a very mediocre return. It's like anything. You've got to put the time and the effort into one, learning how it works. Two, feed it the assets. If it wants 25, 30 images, feed it 25, 30 images. If it wants all these titles and long headlines and short headlines, feed it all of those assets, feed it all of those, everything it wants, give it what it wants. Take the time to really nail those audience signals. Make sure that the feed is well optimized and is descriptive for how people search, and you will get a good performance. So I think Performance Max, absolutely. I don't think there is a clear winner in terms of you've got to do one or the other. We're doing both. I think both have a role to play. As a general stance on this stuff, for me, I am reluctant to have any client that is solely reliant on Performance Max, in part because I think search has a huge role to play, search ads. I think retargeting has a standalone role to play, and I don't like to run retargeting purely through my Performance Max campaigns. I think standard shopping has an out-and-out role to play, particularly if it's your best sellers where you want to just focus and go, look, take these products and really dial that budget. And I want a little bit more control than I can get with Performance Max. So I think that has a role to play as well. But look, one of the best things that Google has, the ability to experiment. So if you're not sure, run an experiment, test, compare.
So true. Yeah, absolutely. Let the data decide, as it were.
Oh, well, this is the beautiful thing, Kate, about what we do, right? Is we get, we have all this data. We are spoilt. We have a wealth of data, more data than we've ever had in history, which is a lot of work, but it gives us, if we know how to mine that data, we know how to extrapolate it and crucially understand it. Then we're kids in a toy shop, right? The options, the opportunities, and what it can tell us is endless, which is amazing. Right. Last question, and I might bring Darren in on this one because you asked what are the must-have new tools and apps that we've come across in the last 6 months. And I was talking to Darren before we came on the pod this morning. And we were saying what are some, and I think the must-have tools that we're using, tools and apps, pretty much all come down sitting within the creative side of our business.
Yes, I do.
And they're actually very heavily AI. And Darren is our AI creative man. He heads up our creative services. So Darren, just you've come up with 3, haven't you, that we're using, that we actually mentioned on a very recent Tea Talk that we did. Just give us a quick synopsis of these 3 must-have tools that we're using and why.
Yeah, so as Aaron says, they're all sort of AI based, and they all help with the streamlining of our video creation process. So essentially the first one, and I'll sort of say these in sort of process order and how I would use them. The first one would be a little sort of plugin for Premiere Pro called Autopod. And I use that on the podcasts like this one. And I also use that on our Tea Talks as well. And essentially what it does is it aligns audio tracks with video tracks to identify who is talking at what moment. And then it essentially just cuts down the whole video in a matter of seconds. And it can essentially save you, depending on how long the video is, hours. Which is crazy. I remember the first time I used it, I was blown away by it. And it also helps that it actually does it in sort of real time. So you watch it doing the work and it's like, amazing. Wow, this is amazing. Second one I would use, and this is really good for social posts, is a website that you might have heard of called Opus Clip. And that essentially what it does is you can put a full video in. Doesn't matter what the ratio is. It can be landscape, it can be portrait, and then you can essentially give it a few specifications. So you might say that you want some portrait videos, you want them to be less than 30 seconds, and then it will give you a bunch of cut downs. It will rate them all. and it will give you the good ones, and it can even put subtitles in and everything like that. So essentially what it does is it gives you loads of content that you can then push out onto your socials, and you're then ultimately saving a lot of time, and you can go in and edit them as well if you need to. So that's really, really good for socials. And then the last one, just because it's really good to sort of cross-pollinate with your content, is everybody's heard of ChatGPT, but ChatGPT is not amazing at writing. So I use one called Claude.ai. And essentially what I will do is I will take the transcript from a video that we've done. And you can do that just by, when you upload it onto YouTube, if you go into the description and scroll down, I think it takes a couple of days for it to sort of generate this. You can get the transcript, you copy all of that, put it into Claude, and then get it to write you a blog, essentially. And I always recommend going through and checking, as with anything to do with AI, but it gives you a really good starting point to then take that, make a blog, put it onto your website. And what we do with that as well is we sort of embed the YouTube video there, so that we're always linking to the website, not to YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. I can't believe we made it this far into the podcast without talking about AI yet.
Well, we had to get it in at the end, didn't we?
Yeah, they sound great. I mean, I love the sound of Opus. We in TikTok, they actually offer something native that I definitely felt like across the other social channels we were missing, where you can take those kind of the videos and then repurpose them in different formats. So that's good to know.
Yeah.
There you go. You're welcome. Kate, thank you so much for being on. Have you got any other questions or anything else you want to ask before we skedaddle off?
No, I mean, we've had a great chat. I think I was interested to know if you knew of any kind of cookieless attribution software that you think is going to have any real impact. I'm still kind of skeptical with these, but there's a few out there. So I wondered if you'd heard
for what purpose? What do you mean?
So, we talked about the death of the third-party cookie,
and
there's definitely attribution software out there now which offers, cookieless attribution. So, one of the businesses that I'm aware of that's been in my circles before is called Corvidae, Corvidae. And just think, we see lots of emerging tech like this. If you'd heard of anything like that that's worked.
No, is the honest answer. I think one of my techie guys probably has, my really techie guys, but I think, as you say, some of these things, it's all evolving so fast. So that's not going to be one that I can help you on. Or there's a couple that I've heard of on the periphery, but not one that I would want to mention right now because I haven't really played with it or had a chance to experiment with it.
Okay, well, maybe it's one to be continued.
There you go. It might, hey, like everything, right? All of this is just one big, in 3 months from now, 6 months from now, things are going to continue to evolve. All of these tools are just going to continue to innovate. It's what keeps us on our toes, right? It's what it's what we love about it, isn't it? We do, don't we? We do. Okay, I've loved having this conversation. It's been really good. We've gone a little bit. I've been able to get my geek off, which is great. So thank you so much for coming on. Hopefully there's a few things there, a little bit of food for thought in terms of when you're starting to roll out those ads and you're starting to think about ways to do that and stuff like that. So it's been really good.
Pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome. Kate, thank you so much. Best of luck with it, and keep us posted how you guys get on as you really start to ramp up those ads and scale this brand, because I think you got all of the fundamentals in place there. I think you're going to be off to the races. I wish you every success.
Thank you so much to come. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Darren.
All the best. Thanks, Kate. Take care. Well, there you go. That was Kate. That was a cracking conversation. I absolutely loved that. Great brand, startup brand. I think there's something so exciting about a startup brand in its infancy. You've just kind of got the keys to the toy shop. There's so many ways you could take that, that you've got a great brand. There's different channels there. And I think crucially what Kate's going to have to do, and I think what a lot of startup brands in that infancy, those first few years, really need to not only have a digital strategy, but actually think about a strategy per channel, per platform. So organically, what are you going to do? How are you going to rank? How are you going to increase that visibility? And then, what's our paid strategy look like? And then from a social perspective, okay, well, have we got a social strategy? What does that look like? And these things don't need to be overbaked. They don't need to take, days and days to fathom out, but I think it's worth siloing them and have our overall digital growth strategy perspective, but also then go, from a paid perspective, we're here today, we want to be there tomorrow. From an organic perspective, in this case, really looking good, but I think she needs to split up the brand versus non-brand. I think she might be surprised just how little visibility they actually have when they take out brand. Therefore, You know where the brand is right now. Okay, very little. Right, how do we improve that? Okay, well, it's content, it's promotion. We've got to build our brand. From a paid perspective, we've got to do this. We didn't even touch on it, but I think email marketing plays a key role for this brand in terms of, building that rapport. It's very lifestyle, these kind of products, as are a lot of home garden lifestyle products that we market. So tapping into not just the need, I want to buy the product now, but actually thinking from a lifestyle perspective, I want to tap in, I want to tell the story about that sort of lifestyle side. So I think a few things for Kate to consider there, and a few things hopefully that have been able to resonate with you, not just from a technical perspective in terms of maybe giving you a few ideas and a few bits to think about, but also from a how you can really take your brand and start to think about the different channels, different platforms, and different routes to market. I've loved it. It's been great fun, this one. Thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciate it. And I will see you on the next one. Take care.